At first glance, Tauros is one of the more boring Pokémon. It's a bull with 3 tails and not much else. And since Generation 4, you'd have no reason to use it competitively either. It's been a legitimately awful option for nearly 20 years. But during the early days of competitive play, Tauros was a menace. Longtime tournament players consider it the strongest Pokémon in Smogon's Generation 1 OU tier, where the only Pokémon banned are Mew and Mewtwo. If you're new to competitive play, it might be hard to see why though. Tauros has pretty solid stats, but nothing that looks overpowering. Its defensive stats are decent, but not exceptional, and while 110 speed is very good, there were other powerful Pokémon that were faster than it from the very beginning. Tauros' biggest benefit actually comes from its typing. Normal is an incredible offensive type. It doesn't hit anything for super effective damage, but there's also only 2 types that resist it and 1 type that's immune to it. And one of the types that did resist it, the Steel type, didn't even exist in Generation 1. So unless you were a Rock or Ghost Pokémon, normal types were hitting you for unmodified damage, and they had plenty of powerful moves to dish out a ton of damage. Normal had 5 of the best attacks in Generation 1. Tauros took advantage of 2 of them, Body Slam and Hyper Beam. Body Slam is a great move. 100% accuracy with 85 base power and a 30% chance to paralyze your opponent. You really can't ask for much more than that without a move being outright broken. Hyper Beam was outright broken. What prevents Hyper Beam from being used everywhere today is that it has a 1-turn cooldown period, meaning you can't use Hyper Beam on consecutive turns. This is mostly true in Generation 1, unless it knocks out the opposing Pokémon. This is what makes Tauros the best Pokémon in Generation 1, short of Mew and Mewtwo. It outspeeds almost everything, and the few Pokémon that can outspeed it don't have the bulk to take a Hyper Beam from it. Body Slam gives Tauros a safe option, which is also incredibly risky to switch in on because of the high chance of paralysis. Hyper Beam gives Tauros a nuclear option that lets it tear through teams without interruption after minimal setup. Tauros' final 2 moves are general coverage. Earthquake is to deal with Gengar, whose poison typing I tore into in a previous video. Gengar sees a lot of play in Generation 1 in large part because it's immune to normal type attacks. This makes it the safest answer to a potential Hyper Beam or Body Slam from Tauros or Snorlax, the head-splitting frustration that is Glitched Wrap, and the constant critical hits of Persian, with its utility further being boosted by an immunity to Explosion. Tauros matches Gengar's speed and can knock it out in 2 hits with Earthquake. Tauros' final move is often a special attack, as odd as that might seem to modern players. Tauros nowadays boasts a truly pathetic base 40 special attack, outdone even by non-evolved Pokémon like Stunky and Barboach. But back in Generation 1, special attack and special defense were a single stat, and Tauros' special stat was a solid base 70, which is now its special defense stat today. Though it's by no means great, it can still pack a punch against the right opponent with the right move. Using Blizzard lets it get super effective damage on the normal type resistant, physically defensive Golem and Rhydon, whose special stats are very low. Going with Thunder or Thunderbolt gives Tauros a tool to check Cloyster, another one of its best checks otherwise due to its high physical defense. This version of Tauros owned Generation 1, but not without some caveats. I'm working on a video that covers this topic in more detail, but suffice it to say, fighting types were dreadfully bad in Generation 1. So much so that Poliwrath is actually seen as worse than its pre-evolution Poliwhirl because it's a fighting type. With no chance of being hit super effectively, Tauros, Snorlax, and Chansey were far safer than they really should have been in Red, Blue, and Yellow. This is normally where Tauros' story ends. Dominant in Generation 1, then kinda forgotten about. but it was actually competitively relevant well into Generation 3. The removal of the Hyper Beam glitch did it no favors entering Generation 2, nor did the introduction of Steel-type physical walls like Fortress, Skarmory, and Steelix. If you can manage to get rid of them, however, Tauros is right back in its old element. Replace Hyper Beam with Double Edge, take advantage of the Sleep Talk glitch, and Tauros can run its old strategy of hit very hard, very fast, very well. That's not as easy as it sounds though. All three Steel types are mainstays in OU for a reason, and good players will make sure to keep them safe. You can quickly find yourself wishing you'd brought a more versatile Pokemon in place of Tauros due to this limitation. It can't do anything to them. And in a wild turn of events, it's not even the best normal type anymore. Snorlax dominates Generation 2 even more extremely than Tauros dominated Generation 1. So if you're looking to take advantage of the normal type's ability to hit a wide range of Pokemon for strong neutral damage, there's clearly a better option. Tauros' true last hurrah comes in Generation 3, in a doubles format that served as the prototype to modern VGC events. I've made multiple videos covering this format, and played it a bunch with a small Discord community that formed around it last year after old tournament records were uncovered. There will be an invite link to that Discord in the description below if you're interested in playing. In what is now known as the Ore Coliseum format, Tauros is back to its old ways of being one of the best Pokemon. It's helped by the introduction of abilities and items. Intimidate was a great ability for Tauros, allowing it to have some added utility by lowering the opponent's physical attack stats. And if you see a Tauros in this format, it's holding Choice Band almost 100% of the time. Tauros' base 100 physical attack stat was never fantastic, and by the time Generation 3 came around, there were both a lot bulkier Pokemon and a lot better offensive Pokemon that you could choose from. Choice Band gave Tauros the added punch it needed to compete with the best Pokemon of the time. Unlike its physical attack stat, Tauros' base 110 speed was still really good, and let it outspeed or tie with the best Pokemon the Ore format had to offer. In rare cases, you'll actually see the return of Hyper Beam. Choice Band Hyper Beam knocks out almost anything that doesn't resist it, and can be a great option in late game situations where Tauros' high speed often proves incredibly beneficial. Fast Earthquakes are another big plus, especially in a format where Metagross is the best Pokemon. Here, Tauros again benefits from gameplay elements that would be changed in the following generation. Generation 3 introduced double battles, and there were a few gameplay quirks that made it different from doubles in Generation 4 onward. Notably, spread damage reduction doesn't get applied to moves that hit all of the Pokemon on the field, meaning Tauros can fire off choice-banded Earthquakes at Metagross and its partner that are just as powerful as they would be in singles. The way spread damage works in Generation 3 is one of the biggest reasons Tyranitar isn't seen as a top Pokemon in the Ore format. Along with making Double's Earthquake more powerful, the spread damage settings also make Tyranitar's signature Rock Slide much weaker. Here, moves that only hit both of your opponent's Pokemon see a 50% damage reduction, as opposed to the 25% damage reduction that we've known as the standard since Generation 4. Stronger Earthquakes would also seem to put Tauros' partner in more danger, but many of the best Pokemon in Ore are immune to ground-type attacks. The Latias, Gengar, Zapdos, and Gyarados just to name a few. My main team in the format sports Tauros alongside 3 of them, as part of a rain team where Tauros has proven extremely helpful as a late-game cleanup sweeper. It's incredibly cool that the Pokemon who dominated the first generation of battling got a new lease on life in the first attempts at what we now know as VGC. But entering Generation 4, the bottom fell out, and Tauros has never been able to recover. In Generation 4, fighting types were buffed immensely, meaning Tauros finally had multiple top-tier threats that could hit it super effectively. This is in stark contrast to Generations 2 and 3, where there was basically only one main fighting type Pokemon that Tauros had to keep an eye out for. Alongside the general power increase the series kept seeing, this was enough to boot Tauros out of relevancy in competitive circles. That's where Tauros has remained since late 2006, a relic of bygone formats. And while it continues to struggle in singles formats, Tauros' regional forms in Generation 9 have proven to be fairly effective in VGC. Tauros' legacy in competitive play is incredibly strange. It was basically a god in Generation 1, then it saw a resurgence when the Pokémon Company played around with early VGC formats, only to immediately fall off the competitive map for nearly 20 years and then be brought back to life by new regional variants in a completely different competitive landscape. You know, every time I've done one of these videos, I've learned to like the featured Pokémon a little bit more, and that's really been the case with Tauros. Heading into this, I thought it was a bland design that dominated the glitchiest generation we've ever seen, and then immediately died once even the slightest bit of balance was introduced. But in reality, it's the dead king of Pokemon's competitive past, and every so often, it'll stick its hooves out of the grave and remind us that it's still got some life to it. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to watch my other Pokemon content, a playlist of which is on the left. On the right is a video I made on a really cool fan-made Pokemon fighting game, and it's not the only fighting game video on the channel, far from it. So if that also interests you, be sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching!